And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your, hopefully, happy hump day, despite the fact that we're getting terrible weather here in New York, and also that the West Coast, Los Angeles County in particular, is getting smashed not only by horrible high winds, but horrendous fires, like something out of a disaster movie. So best wishes to everyone out there, and I am going to be talking about the movie business, some of whom live out in California, but we do what we do. And yesterday was Nicolas Cage's 61st birthday. And I guess the instinct is to think that you somehow think that he's older because he's been around for so long. Nicolas Cage first gained prominence in the mid-1980s. And he kind of seemed older than he was at the time, which is strange because he didn't look particularly old, but maybe he had an old-fashioned look. For example, in movies like Peggy Sue Got Married, a film that it was shot almost 4 decades ago. But Nicolas Cage is an outlier in a business filled with outliers. He is a unique, quirky, distinctive kind of a personality, and it comes across in so many of his performances that he is Hollywood royalty. For those who didn't know, his real last name is Coppola. He is Francis Coppola's nephew. His father, August, was kind of a renowned scholar, a literature professor. I want to say it was UCLA or USC, but I'm not sure about that. But he got into the movie business because his uncle was in the movie business. And then you could say, so was his aunt, Talia Shire. So people get carried away with Nepo babies, but the reality of Nicolas Cage is he would have been discovered had he so chosen to go into the movie business because he had a distinctive, very unique look. And he's a hell of an actor. And the fact that he's a character outside of that doesn't hurt. So Nicolas Cage is an Oscar winner. For people who maybe picked up his career in later era, maybe even some members of Gen Z who only know him for his more recent work, a film like Renfield, which I really thought was a missed opportunity. And the fact that he's willing to poke fun at himself. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent with Pedro Pascal, it was okay. I thought the film could have been better. It had a little bit of the movie within a movie kind of stuff. Elements of Three Amigos, Chevy Chase, Steve Martin, Martin Short a million years ago. I don't think the film was altogether successful, but it was good to see Cage and is good to see him doing great work in present day. His performance in a film which I didn't like that much, Dream Scenario, he knocks it out of the park. And I thought that he had a chance to get a Best Actor Oscar nomination, but it didn't happen. The film didn't make enough of an imprint, I guess, for his performance to really have people take note. And 2024 was quite the stacked year for Best Actor when you had someone like Paul Giamatti who gave literally the performance of his career, and that's saying something, in The Holdovers, but it was just Cillian Murphy's time. It was just his time. So no room for someone who already won an Oscar in Nicolas Cage. So Nicolas Cage first came to my attention in the movie Peggy Sue Got Married, where his character is in 2 time periods, as is the heroine, played by somebody who at the time was the biggest star in the cast. Ironically, a cast that included Jim Carrey and Joan Allen, in addition to Nicolas Cage. The biggest star in the cast at the time was Kathleen Turner. It's her movie. And Nicolas Cage in that film plays, his name is Charlie, but the Peggy Sue of the title is the Kathleen Turner character. And I think it's supposed to be 25th high school reunion. And Kathleen Turner's Peggy Sue seems to time travel back to when she was 18. And Peggy Sue and Charlie are married in their early 40s. They have a daughter played by Helen Hunt. I forgot about her, another Oscar winner in the cast. And they're married but unhappily. I think they're headed for divorce, or perhaps they already have divorced. And Peggy Sue is the kind of person that says, if I could go back in time, I would do a lot of things different. Now, unfortunately, from a historical perspective, a lot of people don't know this, but the previous year, Back to the Future had a very similar time travel element, although Peggy Sue Got Married, I'm not really sure is actually a time travel movie. I think it has time travel elements, but it's actually more of a lucid dream or a nightmare fantasy come to life. What would happen? But Nicolas Cage's performance was heavily criticized at the time for its overly stylized aspects. He plays the hell out of the character of Charlie. You could say it's the first instance of him chewing scenery like William Shatner on crack, that he is so over the top in his... So you have performance, and the character of Charlie is presented as a guy who's always performing, literally, figuratively, symbolically, and I think Nicolas Cage's performance is highly entertaining. And I feel like it almost plays better now when you know the career that he's had and what he's capable of. The thing is, you can't give a terrible performance unless you have a lot of talent. And I would say the same about his buddy. There's a lot of jokes. I even kind of got in on it on Instagram. For Nicolas Cage's birthday, he posted a picture of John Travolta, or a picture of Travolta and Cage in Face Off. Well, I can't tell them apart, so what's the difference? But Travolta is somebody who was also given some really shitty performances because he has the range, because he can be broad. He is not tied within a narrow window. He has a lot of ability. And I happen to like Nicolas Cage's performance in Peggy Sue Got Married. And if we're being honest, he and Kathleen Turner really look good together. And Kathleen was also playing kind of in between ages, because I think she was 32 at the time of that film. So the scenes where she's 18, it's maybe a little bit of a stretch. But Nicolas Cage was closer to that age. Cage was 21 when that movie was shot. Jim Carrey was 22 or 23. And not surprisingly, Big Jim steals every scene he's in, and Coppola actually allowed him to ad-lib. There are some moments in that film that are pure Jim Carrey. It wasn't in the script. But Peggy Sue Got Married is a film that I really like. Some would consider it to be in the kind of realm of Coppola. It's one of his weaker films, but that's only because he's made so many incredible movies. Is The Cotton Club better? One from the Heart? I don't think so. And there's been a little bit of groundswell support of late to try to rehabilitate the image of Coppola's film Jack, which is unfortunately not about Jack Nicholson. That would have been interesting, but it's Robin Williams plays a kid who has a condition. It's not called progeria, I don't believe, in the film, but that would be the closest real life condition where he looks 40, but he's actually 10, like that sort of thing. And it has an incredible cast, including a very young Jennifer Lopez and Bill Cosby. I think the movie is just okay. I don't really understand why people are trying to rehabilitate its reputation, but I put Peggy Sue Got Married right in the middle of Coppola's filmography. I don't think it's as good as The Rainmaker. The Rainmaker, to me, is the last truly great film that Coppola made. That's the one with Matt Damon. And speaking of scenery chewing, John Voight in that movie almost outchews Nicolas Cage in Peggy Sue Got Married. Voight is just out of this world. He's so on the nose and just soaking up the fact that he has such a juicy supporting role. But see, the thing with Nicolas Cage is that there were certain movies of his that I didn't respond to the performance. And I found them to be just off-putting. Vampire's Kiss, cult film, there was talk of a sequel, and when they announced Renfield, well, maybe it'll be a little bit of a twist. Maybe it's the guy from Vampire's Kiss if you want to go nuts. I didn't like Vampire's Kiss. Now, this poster right here, okay, that's Blue Velvet. That's by David Lynch, who probably, to me, has the least number of masterpiece films. He's got one. Who is as great a filmmaker as has ever lived. Because Blue Velvet is so incredible that it puts Lynch, to me, he's a peer of Spielberg, Coppola, Lucas, Scorsese. That is how great that movie is. Well, David Lynch made a film with Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern, who was also in Blue Velvet, although she's not on the poster. Isabella Rossellini and Kyle MacLachlan are on the poster. It should give you some idea what the movie's obsessions are all about. But Wild at Heart is a film I don't like. And the thing with David Lynch, I didn't like The Elephant Man either. I saw what he was going for, didn't like it. His version of Dune, not that good. Not that good. The Straight Story, to me, is Lynch's second best film behind Blue Velvet. But Wild at Heart is a movie with another big, broad, polarizing Nicolas Cage performance. And a lot of people love it. Didn't think it was that good. But Honeymoon in Vegas is a scream. It is an absolute scream. That was the Andrew Bergman film from the early 90s where he tried to get Marlon Brando to play a certain character, and Brando had worked with him in The Freshman, and Marlon didn't want to do it. So then they had a character in Honeymoon in Vegas, which was supposed to be kind of gently poking fun at Brando. But Honeymoon in Vegas is an example of a film where Cage was no inhibitions and just going nuts on screen for almost the entire running time, and it works. He makes a really cute couple with Sarah Jessica Parker and James Caan as kind of the big bad who maybe is not entirely evil. He just happens to be in this particular situation. Caan is another one of those actors where his performance style can sometimes not work with other actors on screen, but it works with Nicolas Cage also because they don't spend that much of the movie together. But I saw that one in theaters. I'd just gotten out of high school, and I loved Nicolas Cage's performance. I was just absolutely kind of gobsmacked by how good he was and how funny that movie is while telling a really insane story, but it's somehow the actors keep it grounded enough where, okay, this kind of could almost happen. I don't know about jumping out of a plane with a bunch of skydiving Elvis Presley impersonators, but that's where the movie goes. And they recently did, I think, a Broadway musical. I don't know anybody who saw it. I don't think it played that for that long, but it's a film that really seeped into the cultural consciousness, and Cage's performance is just marvelous. And so he did some films before his kind of big bust out in the mid-90s where he firmly cemented himself as one of the biggest box office stars in the world. He did a film with Samuel L. Jackson, who was really rising at the time, Amos and Andrew, not that good. He did a film, Guarding Tess, with Shirley MacLaine, where he plays a Secret Service agent guarding a former First Lady. Not that good. And so Trapped in Paradise, another film, not that good. So he was doing work where he was committed to the material. And a film also from that era, I almost forgot. It was originally titled Cop Gives Waitress $2 Million Tip. It ended up being called It Could Happen to You. And I'm not sure if that was also Andrew Bergman who directed him again. I don't remember. But that was a film that I thought was really good. And Cage's performance, he's very wholesome, sincere, and he plays the role close to the vest. It's like when Al Pacino was doing all the screaming and yelling in the 90s, and then suddenly in Donnie Brasco, he shows us just how great he is. I'm going to show you how great I am. Pacino going berserk in Scent of a Woman, in Heat, and in Devil's Advocate, but then you stick Donnie Brasco in there, and it's like, no. This is an extraordinarily talented performer here. What Nicolas Cage does in It Could Happen to You, again, he and Bridget Fonda look really good together. Now, sometimes it's just that it's two attractive people, but I would argue it's because Cage had really good chemistry with the actress, and I don't mean sexually, I mean that they look good, and it's like Bridget Fonda's performance was elevated because Nicolas Cage is so strong in that role. But the next year is when he performed in the movie Mike Figgis Leaving Las Vegas with another actress, Gen X, we love her, Elizabeth Shue. It's a movie that I really like, but it is very depressing. It is kind of a tough slog. And I actually don't think that Nicolas Cage should have won the Best Actor that year. And 1995 it's the weakest year in the decade of the 90s. The 90s is, to me, the greatest movie decade. It is the best decade Hollywood ever had, for 100% certain. That's a hill I'll go down on, but I love these kinds of debates. If somebody wants to debate, bro, it's got to be the sound period starting in the 30s and the way the 30s ended with films like Wuthering Heights and Wizard of Oz, et cetera, Stagecoach. Most people will either say it's the 90s or the 70s. I'm going with the 90s. But 95 is not a great year. It's not a great year. Think of the best performances of the year, the people who were nominated. Richard Dreyfuss for Mr. Holland's Opus. I would have been okay if Dreyfuss won that. I think he is tremendous in Mr. Holland's Opus. Anthony Hopkins wasn't going to win for Nixon. He kind of tries to do a Nixon impersonation in the Oliver Stone film, but then he kind of doesn't. But you know who is fantastic in support? The aforementioned Joan Allen with one of her Best Supporting Actress nominations. She got 3 of them, I think, in back-to-back years. And then she got a lead actress for The Contender, and no offense to Julia Roberts, I believe that Joan Allen in The Contender is better than Julia in Erin Brockovich. That's all you got, lady, is 2 left feet and ugly fucking shoes. I shouldn't be harsh to Julia. She really is terrific in that film, but I happen to have a soft spot. I think Joan Allen is awesome and was not so much underrated. She should have won an Oscar at some point, is what I'm saying. So my biggest problem with 1995 is, well, number one, I think Mel Gibson should have been nominated for Braveheart. And I understand he got the hardware for director and picture, but Mel's performance in Braveheart, he's in almost every scene. He's great. And I love Tom Hanks in Apollo 13. And I don't think he even got the courtesy of an Oscar nomination. If you ask me, what's the single best moment in Tom Hanks' entire career? Gentlemen, it's been a privilege flying with you. At the end of Apollo 13, where maybe they're all going to die. That, when I think of Tom Hanks, that's the moment that comes to mind, and that's in Apollo 13. My problem with 1995 is I believe the best performance given by an actor that year is by Nicolas Cage's buddy, who I've already mentioned, the guy that he gets mistaken for on social media because they're the same person, according to the movie Face Off, John Travolta in Get Shorty. John Travolta is a great actor. He has had a great career. He probably should have won the Best Actor Oscar for Saturday Night Fever. He lost it to also aforementioned Richard Dreyfuss in The Goodbye Girl. It's an okay movie. But Travolta is electrifying in Saturday Night Fever. Should have won. He gets the Golden Globe in 1995, Best Actor in a Comedy or Musical for Get Shorty. Where was his Oscar nomination? Where was Travolta's Oscar nomination? I don't know. It's wherever Tom Hanks and Mel Gibson's Oscar nomination was. The Motion Picture Academy gave him the old double middle-fingered salute. So if it wasn't going to be Dreyfuss, and you knew it wasn't going to be Hopkins, okay. I like Nicolas Cage's performance. My problem is the character doesn't go anywhere. He's actually capable of more. We've seen him craft three-dimensional characters. The character that he plays, was it Ben Sanderson? I think it's Ben Sanderson. The beginning of the movie, he is at the end of his tether, even though he's still a very young man. He's at the end of his tether. He wants to drink himself to death. That's the movie. That's the movie. That's it. And that's all. And I wanted a little bit other than just a guy who is at the end of his tether, just continuing to go downhill. I thought it was a bit of a missed opportunity. And I remember Cage, when he was talking about the film and is it tragic, this, that, he said he thought it was bittersweet. No offense. That's not correct. I don't agree with him. I don't think that film is bittersweet. The next year, he gets to work with more big hitters in Ed Harris and the late, great Sir Sean Connery in the movie The Rock. And ironically, a couple of years later, they probably wouldn't have been able to call the movie The Rock because of Dwayne Johnson. Because at that point, Dwayne Johnson was just The Rock. He was just a wrestler. Then he became a brand name. Then I don't know what they would have called it. They certainly couldn't have called it Escape from Alcatraz because Clint Eastwood and Don Siegel beat him to it in 1975. Although this movie is not about escaping from Alcatraz. It's about breaking in to Alcatraz. I saw The Rock in theaters. Cage doesn't really do anything performance-wise. The character is not a great name, Stanley Goodspeed. But because his name is so ridiculous, it gives Connery a legendary, all-time great moment. When he introduces himself, Connery is basically playing a James Bond character. Pretend that Dr. No has had James Bond locked up for 30 years, and here he is. His name is John Mason, but he's a former British agent. Do we really need to? Come on. Just like the character that Gene Hackman plays in Enemy of the State, it's the same guy as he plays in The Conversation, 20-some years later. It's not an accident. Come on. When he says to Sean Connery's John Mason, or James Bond if you prefer, I'm Stanley Goodspeed, rather than say, nice to meet you, the way that Sean Connery goes, but of course you are. It's pure James Bond, but of course you are. Shaken, not stirred. Pussy galore, I must be dreaming. Great line readings. Sean Connery could really, he was so great. It's too bad he retired young. He was only 72. His last movie, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, 2 thumbs down, not good. But he did apparently cuff around and get into a fight with the director and beat the shit out of him. Or at least that's what I read. Who knows if he really beat the shit. I know he landed a punch. When you're fighting with the director, that's not good. But I'm just glad that Connery was the one dispensing and not the other way around. It would have been a much worse story, I think. But The Rock was an enormous hit. It was a massive hit. And it's the kind of big budget action spectacle that Hollywood did so well in the 90s. And in that case, it was Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer, kind of teaming up. And it's not really about performance. And then it was the next year that Cage, it seemed as if he was willingly moving away from serious acting, that he just kind of wanted to cut loose. I don't want to say have fun, because making a large-scale Hollywood production, it's not fun. It's hard goddamn work, in the immortal words of Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson in White Men Can't Jump. It's hard goddamn work, because you're in a makeup chair, you get a cut in scene one and they have to do an hour to make it look like the same cut. It's no fun. But he had two action movies that came out in the same summer. Con Air, not good. A lot of people love it. It's not good. Spoiler alert, it isn't good. And Face Off, which is good. And I would have Face Off all-time top 10 action thrillers, not even close. It could even be in the top 5, because he and Travolta made magic. Again, the two guys had great chemistry, and with each one each one taking on the characteristics of the other at various points. There's a lot of humor in a story which ultimately is pretty sad, depressing. It could be a sad and depressing movie, but it has such energy. And the actors, the guys are so fire. And yet again, Joan Allen, in what should be a thankless role, she makes it memorable as Eve, the wife of, John Travolta, Sean Archer, but then John Travolta is not Sean Archer. He's Castor Troy, but he looks like Sean Archer. It is a movie where the shit hits the fan early, and then it just continues hitting the fan for the next hour and a half. What an awesome, awesome film. Now, I really like City of Angels, which was the remake of the Wim Wenders film, Wings of Desire, with Bruno Ganz and Peter Falk, I believe. That movie I really like. I'm not normally one for the four hanky weeper type movie, although I love Bridges in Madison County. That's because Clint Eastwood was doing something he never did, which was play more or less a conventional romantic lead. But I like City of Angels. I saw 8mm in theaters. I found that film to be very problematic. I'm not a fan. I know it's the same screenwriter, Andrew Kevin Walker, who did Seven. A lot of people liked it. It has a little bit of a cult following. James Gandolfini, an interesting role in that film before. He shot it before The Sopranos premiered, but it premiered around the same time. Cage made some movies that I really liked, such as Matchstick Men, such as The Weatherman going forward, such as especially Lord of War, where he kind of got back to real acting and stretching and trying to test himself. And I enjoy the film Family Man. He and Téa Leoni really look good together. Don Cheadle is pretty funny and is kind of a small role there. But Cage continued working hard, and leading into the National Treasure movies, the first two, and they've been talking about doing a third one. I like the first one. I don't love it. Might be in the minority with that. The second one is not as good as the first one. If somebody asks me what are my 5 favorite films with Nicolas Cage, not in any order, I got to go Face Off, The Rock, Peggy Sue Got Married. I think I'll throw Honeymoon in Vegas in there. And I think Lord of War. See, he has a lot of films that are really, really good. The film Weatherman, where he plays a weatherman, literally, who is trying to impress his father, played by just a phenomenal Michael Caine. What an incredible performance by Michael Caine in that movie. And Caine had given a lot of broad, kind of outsized performances in that era, and he won the Oscar for Cider House Rules. But wow. Unfortunately, I only remember Michael Caine in that film. But what he did in Lord of War is he could have been nominated for that film. I thought he was just fantastic in Lord of War. And then Cage's career, it just sort of fell off, doing films like he did the movie Knowing, and then he did the other film which had a similar concept, drawing a blank on the name of it. But he did a lot of movies that weren't very good and didn't do that well at the box office. And then he just started pumping out these straight-to-video kind of films or straight-to-streaming. And we read that he'd spent a ton of money buying properties like French chateaus and stuff of that nature. 15 million for this and 12 million for that. It just gets to be crazy, the amount of money. And the reality is that if you're not making 15 million a picture, you have no business, I don't care who you are, buying a $15 million house and another $15 million house and another $15 million house. Because at a certain point in time, you're going to make a little bit less money. And what are you doing? So he just started working like crazy, and his career, it just really went off the deep end. And unlike Brendan Fraser, who was blackballed, Brendan Fraser really got fucked over big time. It's one of the reasons why when he made his comeback, why people within the business were so overjoyed. It wasn't just Gen Xers like myself were saying, this is one of our guys. We love Brendan Fraser. We love Nicolas Cage too. And when he made the comeback with Renfield, with The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, and some of the other work that he's been doing, like Dream Scenario, you love to see it. Because this is a guy who, even if he wouldn't be playing leading men roles as he's now 61, it's very difficult unless you're Cary Grant to continue to get the girl who's half your age in a movie unless you're Cary Grant. It's not so easy. And you even saw there was a little bit of controversy with Jake Gyllenhaal in the Roadhouse remake, where his co-star, she was like 15 years younger than him, but it wasn't Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, where he looks old enough to almost be her grandfather, even though he wasn't old enough to be her grandfather. But Nicolas Cage he's just a really quirky guy. He is a likable presence. He's good in interviews. And the fact that he gave such an amazing performance in Dream Scenario, I don't think the movie is great. I think it's somewhere in the very good range, but it is a film I recommend everybody see. It has elements of horror films, but basically it's an inverse, almost reboot of Eyes Wide Shut, just from a different angle. And without going into heavy detail, because there's always too much to talk about with any Stanley Kubrick film. In Eyes Wide Shut, Tom Cruise's character, Bill Harford, loses his shit because his wife, more or less, has very serious fantasies and admits to him that she's had very serious fantasies about other men. Some people would say, well, that's too easy of an explanation. But when I watched the film in theaters, that was my takeaway, which is that he's completely going bonkers because she confesses to having had thoughts. She wishes that she could have had an affair, or, in that range. So she's being judged, in part, by things that she didn't actually do in real life. She's being judged by dreams and fantasies that she's had. In Dream Scenario, Nicolas Cage's main character, starts appearing in other people's dreams. Just randomly starts appearing in other people's dreams. He becomes a celebrity, an international figure, but then his appearances in other people's dreams start to take dark turns, where he becomes almost a Freddy Krueger type of character in certain people's dreams. And then there are the dreams where he is hypersexualized and he's having sex with tens of thousands of women, presumably in their dreams. So he's being judged, not for anything that he did, but for the representation of him in the dreams of hundreds of millions of people. It's a very bonkers concept. But Cage does not hold anything back. He doesn't wear his hairpiece. He allows himself to look his age, and they cast Julianne Nicholson as his wife, and that casting, again, is perfect, because this is not the sort of character who would have a wife 20 years younger than him. A similar thing that the filmmakers did with Don't Look Up, because Leonardo DiCaprio, they were de-emphasizing he's a really nice-looking guy. They wanted him to seem like a normal person, and they cast, I don't remember the name of the actress. You see, I had too many thoughts colliding in my head. But they cast an age-appropriate actress as his wife, somebody who is basically his age. And then you could make jokes, yeah, well, Leo would never go for her because she's over 25. But in the world of the movie, it works. And in the world of Dream Scenario, the casting of Julianne Nicholson was beautiful casting. They feel like a real couple. And to see him, Cage, give an Oscar-worthy performance after all of those crappy, disposable action movies that he made. Even the film that he made about the USS Indianapolis, there was so much potential for that to be good. It was terrible. It was terrible. I'm sorry to say. But I believe with Nicolas Cage, sky's the limit because he's back in the fold now. And if you told me that, do I think he's going to get some kind of an Oscar nomination in the next 5 years? Yes, I do. Absolutely. I feel like it's right. He's already made the comeback, and I think it's just a matter of finding the right role, and he's going to knock it out of the park as he did with Dream Scenario. So a happy belated 61st birthday to a really talented actor, quirky guy off screen, and someone it's just so easy to root for, Nicolas Cage. This has been episode 402 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your hopefully not so unhappy hump day here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.